Lord, help this study to be beneficial for our soul, Lord, and for our journey to our eternal home. Lord, help us to be able to soak in the information, Lord. Let it sink deep into our hearts, and let us just have ears willing to hear and eyes willing to see, Lord, and a heart willing to accept. Lord, be with all those that we know that are sick or struggling. We especially always think of Heath, Lord, but we know there's many others as well, Lord. We pray that you can just be with them, be with any of the medical teams that may be taking care of them, or the family members that might be helping to take care of them, Lord. And just continue to watch over us, continue to guide us, Lord, and continue to just help us as we continue to want to grow closer and closer to you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so last week we talked, we were actually in Luke. We're going to switch back to Matthew this evening, and we'll be in Matthew 24, but I would like to get into the beginning of Matthew 25. So this class will be a hair bit different than the other ones, only because I'm going to go a little bit faster and not maybe get into the weeds as much of every single verse, just because there is a larger image that we can kind of pull out from this and kind of a larger context that I think applies well for us today. And so last week we talked about the destruction of Jerusalem and what that was going to look like and what the signs were going to be. And the city was going to be circled by the enemies. It was going to be destroyed. And then the Gentiles' time will eventually come to an end. And then Christ will return whenever that time is. And so this is something that they are going to harp on Jesus here in just a couple of days in his life, because he makes the comment that no stone is going to be left upon another. They're all going to be turned over. And that's something that they're going to harp on as he's on the cross, and even as in the trials. It's one of the things that they're going to falsely say about him, is that he says he can destroy the temple and build it back in 3 days. And so again, they're missing the context here. But as we get into it this evening, we're going to start in Matthew 24, starting in verse 29. And this starts to go in more. So it's going from Jerusalem, and then he starts talking about his eventual return um, whenever he's coming back for all of his faithful servants. So in verse 29, it says, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heaven will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great joy. And he will send his angels with great sound, with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." So this tribulation, what is the tribulation that he is referencing here? In context to what we talked about last week, what is he just finished talking about? The destruction of Jerusalem. Now, is there going to be tribulation during that time? Is there going to be tribulation that's going to follow? What age do we live in now? We live in the end times, right? And so everything is leading up to his second coming. And so there's going to be this tribulation. There's going to be this thing these things that are going to take place. Does anyone remember what happens with Jesus once he takes his final breath? He surrenders himself up. What happens to some things in the earth? The veil rips, right? Things are. Do you have something, Dale? Okay, I thought you were about to say something. Right. So there's different things that take place. There's going to be different signs. And so here he's talking about some of the signs that are going to take place. And in verse 30, he says, "Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." Now, this is something that Dale's probably going to talk about in Revelation. And when you look at this verse, these two verses right here, remember this as you read the book of Revelation, because some people read the book of Revelation and they start thinking that Jesus is going to come back, establish a kingdom, and he's going to, rule over this world. What you're going to notice in this is it says he's going to come on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will what? Does it say he will walk the earth? Does it say he's going to step foot on it? And it says he will send his angels, right? It's not placing him physically on the earth. He's sending his angels, and what are they going to do? They are going to gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. They're not coming to set up some kingdom on earth that's already been done, that's already been fulfilled. They're not coming to battle for all these different years and do this, that, and the other that people will read into in the book of Revelation. They are coming to gather the elect, and you can see this in some of the other parables that Jesus mentions as well. Right? They take um, the wheat and the tares and stuff like that, and you start to separate it. And here's the same thing. So he's going there. The angels are going to gather from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. And then this is where we really start to get into the context that I really want for tonight, verse 32 through Matthew 25 and verse 13. The urgency that we should have, the mindset that we should have, the thoughts that we should have, you're going to find right here. And it's something that I think a lot of us have maybe lost the concept of or the thought of. It's definitely something that the world has lost the thought of. But in verse 32, it says, "Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches has already become tender and put forth leaves, you know that the summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near, at the door. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away." So here he's giving the example of the fig tree. He has cursed a fig tree at this point, and the disciples have seen the withered fig tree the following day. It happened the day before this, on Tuesday. This is still on Wednesday. And if you remember, he cursed the fig tree for it being what? Not producing. And was it in season or out of season? It was out of season, right? And we talked about the importance of that. But here he says, some of you are by no means going to pass away until these things take place. What things are about to take place soon? Destruction of Jerusalem. And when you look at the verse that follows, it says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. Was Jerusalem looked at something that was almost untouchable? It was. But could Jerusalem easily be conquered and destroyed if that's what needed to take place? Yeah. Um, America can definitely fall into this trap. No one's touching us. We've got more aircraft carriers and battleships and probably nuclear bombs, I'd say, than anybody, right? I mean, we've got more battleships, I think, than the entire world combined is the number, if I'm not mistaken. It's something insane how many we have. But we're like, oh, we're too powerful, we're too strong, right? Can we still fall? Did Rome fall? Was Rome the exact same way, that empire? Absolutely. And so he says these things could all pass away, right? We can take down all of this. Jerusalem can without a doubt fall, but what will never fall? What will never pass away? His word, his truth. It's never going to pass away. It's always going to be something. It's going to be fulfilled. Um, and so we need to remember how strong not only his word is, but also how strong and powerful he is. All these things on earth are temporary, but what is not temporary is our salvation and our home in heaven. That's not something that just passes away as Jerusalem could be destroyed. Where we store up our treasures, right? That's where we're going to have them. And so we need to be focused on where we are storing them up at. And also know that his words are not going to pass away. They are going to be fulfilled. When he makes a promise, he will 100% keep it. Any questions or comments, Bill?
Yeah. Through verse 35 is really dealing with what happens to Jerusalem in 87.
Yeah.
Even though it sounds like the world stuff in verses 30 and 31, he's using judgment terminology because he's making a judgment. Really, it's because the Jews rejected Jesus that he's making a judgment upon them, right? It's given them like a whole generation between the death of Christ until AD 70. And that judgment's coming. And it kind of fits with what the Hebrews writer says in Hebrews chapter 12, um, where he says, see that you not refuse him who speaks. And in verse 26, he says, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he has promised, yet once more I shake not only the earth, but also heaven. Now this yet once more indicates the removal of those things that are being shaken, as of things that are made, and the things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, right? And so he's going to get rid of Judaism. And by the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, Judaism is going to be basically dead and buried. And so he's using that judgment terminology because there's a judgment that's coming, but it's the judgment upon the Jews there in Jerusalem.
Yeah, and when you look at the Jews, and even the apostles are probably going to think the same thing. Jerusalem falling is such a great thing. It's almost of the thought, how can the world not come to an end if Jerusalem is going to fall? This is going to be of such great magnitude. How could the end not come shortly after? And Jesus here is, the coming is not this soon after, and that's when you start to look at uh, First and Second Thessalonians, that's something that they're thinking. They're like, "Is it not here yet? Like, these things have happened, and now this, it should be right here now." And that's not what is taking place. So good point. Um, Jerusalem falling is such a massive thing. So, yeah,
Heaven will pass away.
like the heaven that we're going to inherit.
In verse 35 it says heaven and earth will pass away. What's the heaven passing away?
Well, you're gonna,
Yeah,
yeah. So you're gonna have the heavens. The Jews had
in the Jewish mind there are
three. Yeah, yeah. In the Jewish mind, there's three heavens. So you have the sky, like where the birds and stuff are. Then you have space, and then you have heaven. And so if heaven were to pass away, um, then you have to start. If that heaven is going, the one that we're going to inherit, if that's going to have to pass away, then Jesus is saying that there's this place that is prepared for us, this place awaiting us. It would start to contradict itself. So it's really talking about the earth and the skies of it and Jerusalem. All these things are going to pass away, if that makes sense.
The first and second heaven are, but the third heaven.
Yes, the third's going to stay. Yeah. And you just have to think about that there's three. And you can really see that when you go back into Genesis and you start looking at like the creation and process and stuff like that. Good question and good point. Verse 36, it says, this is something that Dale will also probably talk about. I think you already mentioned Revelation. But of that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. This is starting in verse 7 and 37 is what we really need to focus on for our lives today. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Think back to the ark. Not that we were physically there, but think back to that story. Noah is building and building and building. He's preaching, he's telling people, they ain't buying it. They ain't picking it up. They probably all think he's crazy, honestly, because he's spending so long building this thing and it ain't even rained yet. And then you're sitting there. In this, you can probably see someone could be very well be sitting, eating. They could be drinking. They could be at a marriage. They could be at some feast of some sort. And then the first raindrop falls. And then you have to ponder in your head, maybe that crazy guy building that boat might be onto something. But what happens when that thought comes upon your mind? It's too late. Door's closed. You can't get up. So when the Son of Man comes back, you're going to what? Notice it, and you're going to be like, what I was told might just have some substance to it. I should accept it and know it's true, but what is it? It's too late. The door's closed. The importance for us today. Praise be to God that He is patient, very patient with us. He has given us plenty of time to repent and turn, and He's giving everyone else in this world plenty of time to repent and turn. With that patience that He's giving us, we have to have great endurance. Because if He's going to continue to be patient, and that patience lasts for our entire life, say 70, 80, however long we live, you have to have endurance that whole time. If His patience stops tomorrow, you only have to endure till tomorrow because that's when the final day is going to be. So we have to have endurance this whole time. We have to know that He could come at any moment. And so we can't get caught up just as they were in Noah's time, just sitting there eating, drinking, being married, giving in marriage, and not listening to the preaching and the teaching of Noah. And then all of a sudden you're like, he was on to something. It's too late. Then it goes on to say, In verse 40, then two men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. This verse right here, I guess I'm just gonna steal Dale's next lesson for Revelation. This is another verse they're gonna pull for Revelation as well, and I bet Dale's probably gonna talk about it because they'll start, you know,
For the rapture.
yeah, they're gonna start using this verse for the rapture, and that some are gonna be taken, some are gonna be left, and then you're gonna have this whole thing. Some are going to inherit heaven, and some are not, which is the point that Jesus is trying to get across. If you want to take this super, super literal, it would be 50-50. Can you look at other passages to know that it's not going to be 50-50? Is a 50% going to make it to heaven and a 50% not going to make it? Narrow is the gate, right? So it's going to be a minority, unfortunately. We know that. We can read that. The majority of people are not going to inherit heaven, unfortunately. And so here it's saying you could be working with someone, you could be someone in your household, it could be the person next to you in a church pew. One could inherit heaven, and one could not. Right? You can fake it to the people around you, but who can you not fake it to? Christ. Right? You can't fake it on Judgment Day. You can fake it your whole life, and you can look really good. Judgment Day, you can no longer fake it. And in verse 42, it says this: "Watch, therefore." What should we be doing all the time? Watching, paying attention, keeping an eye out. It says, "Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." I don't know if anyone remembers this show. I'm not even sure I remember the name of it, but I remember as a kid, I loved watching it. I think it was something about like It Just Takes a Thief or something like that. It's probably been 15 years since it came on. I don't know how it went off TV. But essentially, these people would submit a request to this TV show, and they would say, "My house, you can't break into it. We've got a security system. You can't do it." And if they could break into it, then I think you didn't win like a money prize or something like that, but they would install a new security system or something like that. And they would hire this guy and he would break into every house with these crazy plans. But did he do it while they were there? No. He would sit there and be watching them, and they would leave the house, and then he would break in, and then they'd show up, and he'd be like sitting in the recliner and be like, "You lost." Every time. It was insane. I mean, he'd use moving vans, he'd come in through windows. I mean, all these kinds of things, right? If you know someone's going to break into your house, are you going to leave your house or are you going to stay there and protect it? You're gonna stay there, right? So on when he decides to come back, is it going to be a time that we know it's going to be? Now, people like to make predictions. People love to do math, and um, they ain't figured out. You can't figure it out yet. It's the unsolvable math problem. It just don't math. But people keep trying to figure it out. We don't know the day or the time. That's what makes the urgency and the endurance so important. Because since we don't know the time, we have to always be ready. We have to always be watching. We have to always be on a lookout. Because it's going to happen when? At a time that we could not be expecting. Verse 44, because it says, "Therefore you also be ready." Now, in order to be ready, what do you have to do? You got to prepare. You have to have, you could say your bag's packed. I don't know what you have. You have to have your game plan, right? A lot of, use this as an example, a fire drill. If you've never practiced a fire drill, Kathy probably loves practicing fire drills at school. Those kids listen so well, I'm sure. If you never practice a fire drill or a tornado drill or I don't know what drill, if you never practice it and then it happens, what are you not? You are not prepared because you're like, I've never rehearsed this, never really gone through it, haven't really thought about what this would happen. So, in order to be ready, you have to be prepared. You have to be thinking about these things. You have to be making sure things are in order. So, when it does happen, you're ready and you're prepared to handle it. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour you do not expect. He's coming. Any questions or comments before we jump into the next part? Mark.
Well, not only is this future, it's also right, it's happening right in front of
Mhm.
Jesus is the Son of Man.
you won't recognize the time of the Son of Man. And going back to verse 30, there are so many connecting points to Jesus' life. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Well, that's what happened. Jesus is the star that guided the wise men. And the temple that he said is going to be destroyed is also his body. He destroyed this temple, and I'll raise it up in 3 days, meaning his body. So all of this apocalyptic stuff, the greatest apocalyptic event of all time is Jesus on the cross. The creation and killing the creator. That's the most, that's the craziest thing at all. No one could ever write.
Yeah.
And then rise again and then remake the world.
I was gonna say that, it's interesting, and yes, we are waiting for the coming of Christ, but like he said, the Bible, there's so many twists and turns with past, present, and future, and of course, that's a spiritual thing, and it's hard for us to put our finger on exactly what God means by certain things, and we'll find out later. But one of the things that I was thinking is, even though we're waiting the coming of Jesus, our life is a vapor. Our time, our judgment time can be over when we die.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, I'm walking up, I could be walking out the door, slip, fall, hit my head like my dad did, boom, I'm gone.
Mhm.
And we didn't. I don't know how he lived through 2 heart attacks, he lived through all these things, and yet he had an accident, and nobody saw that coming.
And
We don't know when we're gonna die either, and so for us, that's our time. We're done. There's no chance after that.
Yeah.
So in that way,
that's why I wanted to kind of go through verse 29 of Matthew 24 all the way to verse 13 of Matthew 25, because when you look at it, and you could even get to the next one as well, it is all about you don't know the hour. You don't know when the teacher's going to give you a pop quiz. And if you ain't studied for the pop quiz, buckle up. Because you ain't going to like the results probably, right? And you can't guess your way through Judgment Day like you can a pop quiz. So when he decides to come back, or when we take our final breath, or whatever it may be, make sure you're ready to take the quiz, right? Make sure that you've prepared yourself for that moment. The average age is 72 or 75, but that doesn't mean you're going to make 72 or 75, because in that average, there's people that make it to 100 or even 100 plus, and there's people that make it a couple breaths on earth, right? There could be people that live for 20 years, 50 years. We don't know when it's going to be. But we have to always be ready. And that shouldn't be something that makes us nervous or scared. Honestly, it should give us reassurance, because if you're living your life the right way and you stay prepared, it doesn't matter. Because you know that whenever that test comes, you're ready for it. I've used this example numerous times, but when I was at school at UT, I would always sit outside of the classrooms before a big test, a midterm or final, whatever it was. I'd always be playing games on my phone or looking at something. I would never be studying for a test right before you walk in there. There'd be people in the hallways just panicked, looking over every note, trying to figure out all. And I'm like, well, if you just now try to figure it out, it's too late, right? And if I go look over my notes right now, I'm going to confuse myself. I already know the material. I don't need to look at it another time, right? And so you can be relaxed, you can be confident, you can be assured that you're going to make it because you've already prepared yourselves for it. And that's how that day should be for us. So whether we have an accident, we walk out here, or whether we, I don't know, we have a heart attack or a stroke in 15 years from now, we can be confident in that moment if we prepared ourselves. When that moment becomes scary is when you've wasted all those times and all those minutes and all those hours and all those days and years not preparing. That moment then becomes really scary and really not fun, because then you're like, man, I've had all these years, I've had all these teachings, I've had all these, and I've not done anything, right? That's when it's scary, but it shouldn't be scary for us. It should be reassuring, because we know that we need to be prepared. Anything else?
It's not a pop quiz, that's a pop final.
Final exam. Yeah. Um,
It sounds like a sermon plan.
yes. Pop quiz.
Pop final.
Pop final. Yeah, there's never a pop finals. They supposed to tell you about that. Um, in high school, if you make it so many days, they let you take some of your finals off. Good stuff. In verse 45, it goes and it says, "Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master made ruler over his household to give them food in due season?" And here again, it repeats almost the exact same kind of context. Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Assuredly, I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, "My master is delaying his coming," and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of, and will cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Really good outcome, really bad outcome. All about how you want to view it. Judgment Day can be really, really good for you. Judgment Day can be really, really bad for you. Hearing the trumpet sound and knowing he's coming back can be a really, really good day for you, or it can be a time where it's like your gut has just completely fallen and you know it's not going to be good. Use time wisely. So, who's the blessed servant? What's he doing when the master comes back? What he's supposed to be doing. Has he left us works to be accomplished here on earth? Are we doing those works? Or when he comes back, are we going to be I don't know, 15 videos in on like a YouTube deep dive? We've like gotten sucked into like all the videos. Like you might also like this, and we're, watching who knows what. Oh, have we consumed our time with things of the world? Or is he going to find us doing his will, chasing after him, and doing the good things that he's pleased us? And notice what it says in verse 48. This right here is exactly where we can so quickly slip if we're not careful. It says, "But if that evil servant says in his heart, 'My master is delaying his coming,'" I've got a couple more days. You can hear this often with folks. "Well, I'll give my life to Christ when I just get a little bit better. I'll give my life to Christ maybe tomorrow or this weekend or um, next year. It'll be a New Year's resolution or whatever, right?" The master could be delaying because of his patience. But when you take that, what if he decides his patience is up and there's no more delay to it and it's boom, it's haste, it's right there? We don't know when his patience is going to expire and when it's going to run up. So we cannot fall into the trap of, well, my master is delaying. My master's delaying the same. Therefore, I've got time to fix these things. I've got time to go live this life over here because I still got another 15 years to get it right. I can live like a crazy person up until like 65 or whatever, age. And then I got to get right because I'm getting closer to the end, and you're gambling with your soul and where it's going to spend eternity. Why even risk it? It's not worth it because if you're wrong on it, now you've not only affected just your earthly life and you've missed the pleasures and the riches of it, but now you've messed up your eternity and where you're going to spend it. And so he can't fall into the trap of him delaying. And in verse 49, because of the delaying, what does the evil servant do? He starts to beat his fellow servants. He starts to treat people the wrong way. And then he starts to eat and drink with the drunkards. So now he's gone off, he's living this life. It kind of reminds you of the prodigal son. You go back to that story. What happens if that son goes out and all of a sudden that coming is when he's out there with the pigs and he hasn't come back yet? Did he have the opportunity to come back? He had it because the patience was there. But if the patience expired while he was out there with the pigs and he hadn't returned yet, where's he still at? He's still with the pigs. And you don't have the happy ending of the prodigal son, right? And so we have to be careful. We have to be wise. We have to be working on our own salvation. We have to be always ready. So it says, the master of the servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of. Have you ever been randomly surprised by someone? You hear your doorbell ring and you're like, oh no, not now. This is not a good time. And you look and it's like, I don't know who it could be. Someone that really brings you a lot of joy. That phew, I'm glad you're at the door, right? You're excited about it. It's like a random gift, a random surprise, right? You're not expecting it. It can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. Mark?
With 7:45, we then spake on one servant whom his master was made ruler over his house to give him food and juice. And I think of Joseph in Genesis. I mean, he believed the prophecy God gave him through the dream, and he kept hold of that hope, even though through none of his choosing or doing, he went into slavery, and then went to be a servant, from slavery to servant, then down to the dungeon, and he kept on being faithful to God. And when he had a chance to live life of pleasure, he didn't do it.
Yeah. Joseph is probably one of the greatest examples um, of endurance when things just never seem to go your way. It's almost when you're like, man, life can't get any worse than right now, and then it does. It's like that's what Joe like. It's like he gets out of it, and you're like finally back on it, and it's like boom, and then you get kicked, and it's like even harder than the first one. But Joseph just keeps going. He just keeps trucking along, and he just keeps having the endurance. Does his endurance pay off? Absolutely. And so will ours. Beautiful point, Mark.
Even his bones got to do what they wanted to do.
That's right. That's a good point. There you go. That's a good point. Um, funny. That could be a sermon title too. How to get your bones to do what you want them to do. Yeah, that's good. Um, starting in verse 25, this is probably what we'll kind of start to wrap up for the evening, but it kind of repeats the exact same thing. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who take their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now, 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. Again, you see the word delayed. Delayed can be really good, delayed can be really bad. That's the point of all this tonight. His delaying could be the opportunity that you have to get right and repent in order to be found in a saved state. His delayed could also be something where you find yourself getting lackadaisical or stale, I guess you could say, and falling the opposite way and not being prepared and not being ready. What we need to be thinking of when he's delayed, when his patience is still enduring, what does that mean for Christians? What does that mean for our non-Christian friends? That means we still have a chance to speak to them. They still have a chance to repent and turn. The delaying should be a good thing for us. It should not be something like, man, is he ever going to come? He's not coming tomorrow. I know that, right? That should not be our mindset. Our mindset should be, he's delayed another day. He's delayed another minute, whatever it is. Now I still have an opportunity to go and talk to people about it. Should always be looked at as a good thing. It says, so there's 5 wise and 5 foolish. So some of them took oil with them and some of them didn't. Some of them were prepared and some of them weren't. Starting in verse 6, it says, and at midnight a cry was heard, behold, the bridegroom is coming. Go out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the wise answered, saying, no, lest there should not be enough for us and you. But go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. A couple things you can pull away here. If you're not prepared, just because your spouse or your parents or your friend or even your child is prepared, you can't just take from their preparedness and just use it for yourself. You have to work out your own salvation. You have to prepare for yourself. Now, the other thing is, If you're prepared, as much as you want to share your preparedness with those around you, you can try. You can try to help them get prepared. But just because you've got all the supplies with you needed doesn't mean that they're also going to bring the supplies. You can give them all the tools they need. You can give them the packing list that they need to have. Doesn't mean they're going to pack it. The other thing we have to be careful of is if you're prepared and you want other people to be prepared, you can't change what your preparedness list is in order to fit other people because then you become not prepared. They have to shift to what the prepared state is. We cannot go from prepared to unprepared, if that makes sense. That makes sense what I'm saying here? Tell me if you're not tracking. Don't let your state of being prepared shift away to a state of not being prepared simply because you're trying to get along and not upset the vote of those around you. They have to work out for themselves. And notice in verse 9, it says, "But the wise answered, saying, No, lest there should not be enough for us and you." If you give away all that you've prepared to everyone around you and you've not saved anything for you, you've not taken care of yourself, are you now prepared? If all you're doing is giving and giving and giving, but you never fill up your cup and you don't make sure that you're prepared, you've made sure everyone else is prepared, well, what happens? Now you're not prepared. So we have to make sure that we're prepared, and then we have to help prepare other people as well. And in verse 10, so they go out to buy, and so as they go out to get prepared, what happens? Those who were prepared went in with him to the wedding, and the door was what? Shut. While they were going to get prepared, they missed it. It was too late. The door was closed. Verse 11, afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said, Certainly I say to you, I do not know you. But they acknowledged him as Lord. It's one of those verses that is extremely sad and heartbreaking. There they go, going to get prepared. They come back ready. It's too late. Just like it was too late in Noah's time, just like it's going to be too late when Christ comes back. It's too late. The worst phrase we could ever hear is, I never knew you, or I don't know you. It's the worst phrase we could ever hear. Verse 13, it says, what? Watch, therefore. Has he said this before? Sure did. Watch. What do you think we should be doing? Watching. Watch, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. So if we don't know the day or the hour, what should we ought to be doing? Getting ready, watching, always preparing. Are you ever prepared enough for his coming? I would say no. You can be prepared and ready, but as soon as you, and I'll say this, I guess is my opinion, as soon as you say, I'm good and I'm prepared enough, and then you stop preparing, what's most likely going to happen is you start trickling back down and you fall into complacency. And all of a sudden you start not being prepared. What we ought to be doing is we get prepared, we get in the prepared state and do what he says to do, obey him in order to get in the prepared state. And then what? It's the theme for the year. Continue to grow closer to him. Can you ever get close enough to him? There's always more to get closer. There's always more that we can learn. There's always more that we can continue to grow closer to him, right? So never be satisfied. I shouldn't say never be satisfied. It's not a good word. Never become complacent with where you're at. Continue to grow closer to him and continue to look at ways to get closer to him. It's always of great benefit to us. Man, right on time. Of course, that clock is 2 minutes early. But any questions, comments? Snyder remarks always saved for Sunday morning.
I think a lot of it has to do with focus.
Mhm.
Said block. So just like the lantern, they were prepared at one time, but then they lost focus. And we have to do that in this world. It's like filling up a car with gas and going on a trip. You start looking around the world, not focusing on the gas gauge, you're not gonna make it.
Yeah.
So we have to continue to focus on Christ and God.
Yeah. And I'll even say this too. I'll give you a good example with gas. I was coming back from North Carolina one time, And I had a great decision that I was going to get across the North Carolina border because gas was cheaper in Tennessee, not by much. But it was a great idea, and I was like, I'll just make over the border, and then I'll get gas. It'll save me, 10, $15, whatever it was. I don't know, not enough to do this. Well, then I get over the border. Well, then what happens?
So I guess-
There's no gas stations. Did I think about that? Sure didn't.
So Burger King.
Yeah, there's no Burger Kings. You get across, you're like, man, there's not a gas station in sight. And so finally, I find this gas station, and I'm like, I hope it's open. It's late at night. I hope it's open. I get off. It had to be the sketchiest marathon gas station that there is in East Tennessee. They didn't have a counter for the register. They had a pop-up, like a little foldable table that had a register sitting on it, and it had some old school pump outside that I thought for certain was going to have water in the gas. And you know what I did? I got like 2 gallons. I said, I'm going to the Pilot. That's like 5 minutes up the road that I know that's there. But the point is, if that gas station was closed, I wasn't making it to Pilot because I kept delaying, right? And so I was sitting there focused on trying to, if I can just get a little bit more out of this, then I'll stop. So Brian brings up a good point. We have to be prepared. We have to keep our eye on what it is that is important, and make sure your gas is on full. Don't run that thing to empty. You playing a dangerous game. Keep the thing full because Christ can make it overflow, which is good because that'll save us some money.
Also, it's hard to prepare someone else if we're not.
It's a vital point. It's a vital point. And it's when it goes into the thing of if you keep pouring out to make sure everyone else is prepared and you're not really preparing yourself, you're probably not really helping. You could be helping the people around you, but you're not going to be helping them as much as what you could be if you make sure yourself is prepared and overflowing. All right. You have something, Dale?
Well, they're not, you have to have your own oil.
Yeah.
You have to have your own oil. You can't rely on someone else's oil to get you in.
Yeah.
You have to have your own.
Yeah. Christ is not going to look at you on Judgment Day and be like, yeah, but your dad was an elder or your dad was a preacher, therefore you're in. That's what the Jews were thinking, right? The Jews were going off the lineage thing. If my family's got it, then I'm got it. That is not how it's going to be, right? It is not just because your spouse or your father or whoever in your family is made it doesn't mean that you're going to make it if you decided to not be prepared yourself.
God can raise up children to Abraham from these stones.
That's right. That's a good point. All right. If there's no other questions or comments,
My translation said be on alert instead of watch. And that sort of kind of turns your focus on yourself ready.
Yeah.
Be on the alert for you and the fact that he might be coming that day. But be on the alert. I like that.
preparedness. That's what's so important about it. That's the whole takeaway that I think we need to have tonight. Just because it's been 2,000 years, right, since he conquered the grave, doesn't mean that we're going to get another 2,000 years. Doesn't mean that we're going to have another 2,000 minutes or 2,000 hours. Doesn't mean any of that. It could be any time, right? And it's so easy. Oh, it's been 2,000 years, so why won't it be another 50? It's so easy to fall into that mindset, and so many people fall into that mindset today. We cannot fall into that mindset because Kathy mentioned it. You could very well have an accident as soon as you walk out of this church building. You ought to be prepared. Why wait any longer? Why not be prepared? Why not be ready? It's nice when you're already prepared for something because you're always ready. You don't have to be scared of the moment because you know you're going to conquer it. So it's a good point. Thank y'all.